Kia ora everyone. Can I just begin by once again reiterating the thoughts and condolences of the New Zealand government to the people in Turkey and Syria at the moment. Hopefully by now you will have had the details of the $1.5 million in international aid that we're putting in at this point. I think all New Zealanders will be feeling this because, you know, as a country that has experienced earthquakes and experienced the devastation of earthquakes, I think, you know, our hearts will go out to all of them.
Prime Minister, how hard did you fight for the rights of Kiwis when it comes to the path to residency?
Look, the Australian government are very familiar with New Zealand's position, and New Zealand's position has not changed. It was certainly one of the topics that we talked about. It was a fairly broad-ranging conversation to begin with, and we fully expect, both sides, that we'll continue to have these kind of discussions.
What does success look like for you with the path to residency?
Look, I don't want to get ahead of that. We've made a commitment that there'll be more coming. We've got some work underway, but I don't want to get ahead of that while that conversation is still a live one.
With the 501s, could we do more? Are you pushing for more? Yes, we heard you say that it's a good win, but do you want to see more traction in this area?
Look, I do want to reiterate what I said earlier. I welcome the change that the Australians have just made in the last few weeks. It is a common sense decision. It does recognise one of the key concerns from the New Zealand side, which is that we've had people deported to New Zealand who have no real connection to New Zealand. In some cases they've been living in Australia since they were babies. Yes, they may have been born in New Zealand, but they have no remaining ties to New Zealand. I think the recent change in Australia to the ministerial directions recognises that, and we absolutely welcome that.
But does that mean anything at all? I mean, it just means that some either official or the minister can make a case-by-case decisions on discretion. It doesn't actually enshrine anything into law or really change anything at the end of the day.
Look, I think it's a sign that the Australian government have taken on board the concerns that we have raised. We'll continue to raise them. We'll continue to talk, but I want to acknowledge that progress is being made.
Anthony Albanese.
Policy and acknowledgement that what they were doing was wrong, and therefore shouldn't that wrong be addressed?
And look, in due course, over time, I'm sure we'll continue to have those conversations. As I've said, the position that Jacinda Ardern set out is still the New Zealand position. And so we'll continue to raise that as an issue, and we'll continue to push for improvements.
But right now in New Zealand, we have a whole bunch of people that have no ties to New Zealand. They're not doing well in New Zealand. Shouldn't they be let back into Australia to reunite with their family?
Look, at this point, as the Prime Minister indicated, the Australian government's position on that has not changed. We'll continue to raise the issue.
Realistically, though, nothing's going to change, right? Like, if the Australian government isn't going to change their minds on this because they'll be so politically unpalpable.
Look, we will continue to raise the issue with Australia. There is goodwill on the Australian side, and we have seen evidence of that. So we'll continue to work with them.
Anthony Albanese didn't comment on the unfairness of the policy before this change was announced. Can you, as New Zealand's Prime Minister, comment on the unfairness?
Oh, look, I think where we've seen examples of people who have no real connection to New Zealand, who have lived most of their lives in Australia, whose family ties, whose connections, whose employment history, whose homes are here in Australia, to have them being deported to New Zealand is an unjust and an unfair outcome. And so that is one of the reasons why I welcome the change that has been made so far.
Why do you think it's taken so long?
That's a matter for the Australian government to comment on.
Do you think New Zealand will be treated as second-class citizens in Australia?
I think we would like the New Zealand government's position is that we would like some reciprocity in that relationship. So we would like to see New Zealanders living here in Australia treated similarly or the same as Australians living in New Zealand.
If Australia were to take any rights off Kiwis in New Zealand, would you reciprocate that?
I don't think a tit for tat has ever enhanced the Trans-Tasman relationship, and that's not been New Zealand's approach in the past.
How's the work going on that? I mean, the deadline's Anzac Day, I believe. It really depends how much the Australians decide to come to the party. What updates can you give us on that?
I'm confident that we're making progress.
How would you describe your approach to advocating for New Zealanders in Australia? What word would you use to describe that approach?
New Zealand's approach and New Zealand's position hasn't changed.
You talk about the strength of the friendship between New Zealand and Australia, but it feels like this issue in particular is damaging that relationship to some extent. extent do you agree with that agreement?
I think, again, my predecessor Jacinda Ardern has made a number of comments on the effect that the previous Australian government position has had on the overall relationship between New Zealand and Australia. We've seen some welcome developments. We'll continue to push for more.
But how can the friendship be so close if there is this particular sticking issue?
I think in all close friendships, there will be areas where you disagree. This is an area where we disagree. There are many, many areas where we have a very, very strong relationship with Australia.
What do you think of Albanese?
Oh, we got on really well, and so I'm looking forward to spending a bit more time with them. Our paths are likely to cross quite a bit in the next few months through various other international events. I think we'll get on well.
Did he give you any paraphernalia?
Not today.
What do
You
you
looked
consider to
pretty
be the
chuffed
main
to
point?
be meeting him. How did it feel?
It was really nice. And look, the New Zealand and Australia relationship, as I've said, is a very important one. But we also have a lot in common. Leaders of Labour parties, relatively recent prime ministers of our countries. And so we were able to, at a personal level, reflect on some of that.
The Albanese government seems to have come closer to New Zealand's position on China and how to talk about China. How important is it for both countries to be broadly on the same page, given previous attempts to sort of drive a wedge between the two?
Look, overall on foreign policy issues, New Zealand and Australia have far more in common than we have in terms of differences. There will be, from time to time, areas of difference. Sometimes there'll be difference in nuance. Sometimes there'll be more differences in substance. But in reality, we are very close together, and so we will continue to work together.
And just on that,
He had talked about, I think he wants to visit China later this year. Jacinda Ardern had expressed a desire to visit once borders opened. Do you have any plans? Have you made a decision yet whether you'll follow up on her sort of commitment or desire to head a trade mission over there?
We're still working. I haven't really had much time to do that in the last 2 weeks, but we are still working on the international travel plans for the rest of the year. But I'm certainly not taking that off the table.
Can you talk about the Republic?
How are you finding the new foreign affairs side of your job? You've pretty much had both domestically focused jobs up to now, and all of a sudden, you're in the thick of foreign policy. How are you finding it? What are your strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I've always had an interest in the world, and so it's it's a new part of the job. That's right. I mean, I haven't had a foreign-facing role. Although, as Minister for Education, that's not actually entirely true, because as Minister for Education, I was responsible for international education, and there is actually a huge interface between international education and a lot of our other areas and foreign policy interests. So I've had some involvement there.
Did the Prime Minister share with you, sorry to interrupt, but I thought I'd never get a question in otherwise.
Well, you over there, that's why I was looking over there, that's right. Yeah.
No, did he share with you his plans to have a consultation tour and conversation on the future of the monarchy? In other words, first steps towards thinking about a republic?
No, it wasn't raised today.
and just further to Sam's question about Australia and New Zealand's positioning on China being more aligned, how do you, as our new Prime Minister, see that playing out in terms of tensions in the Pacific region?
Look, I don't want to get into that today. We've got the Pacific Island Forum coming up shortly, and I'm sure there'll be opportunities for us to get into that in greater detail. We didn't talk about it in huge detail today.
You've had your friend and mentor here, Annette King. You guys were close back in the day of the tumultuous Labour times. What advice did she provide you, and perhaps you can speak to it as she wants as well, ahead of the meeting with the Prime Minister?
Look, Dame Annette is an exceptional representative for New Zealand here in Canberra, and like all exceptional representatives, she provides advice from time to time, and I'll take that advice when I want to. Right.
Could you give us a readout on the business conversation, the conversation with the business people? What did they raise? Where did you think that ended up?
Yeah, look, the issues that were raised here in Australia from the business community were actually very similar to the issues that I talked about in Auckland. Was it last week when I met with business leaders in Auckland? So issues around regulatory certainty, issues around labour shortages, of course, issues around supply chains. Actually, the issues that business here in Australia is facing are very similar to the issues in New Zealand. So we were able to talk about those common areas.
Do they have any gripes about New Zealand regulations?
I think I've yet to meet a business person who doesn't have a gripe about government regulation at some point. But there are similar issues, and then there are some issues that are unique to New Zealand. But I guess the thing that did strike me was just how similar the issues are on both sides of the Tasman.
And just on the earthquakes,
David Seymour said the government believes what matters most is not the content of someone's character, but the colour of their skin or their background. Is he right?
Sorry, run that one past me again.
David Seymour said, the government believes what matters most is not the content of someone's character, but the colour of their skin or their background. Is he right?
No.
And should Pākehā feel shame for their heritage?
No.
And just on the earthquakes, I know you mentioned earlier the amount of money the government set aside for support. Do you have any up-to-date information about how many New Zealanders may be impacted, and any calls for support or people putting their hands up saying, please help us?
No, I don't have the latest information. Well, I guess the only information I have at this point is that there's, I think, somewhere between 20 and 30 people registered on the Safe Travel website, but I don't have more information on how many people may be there.
And no information about deaths or
No.
injuries?
No, I haven't got any information on that at this point.
How much staff there?
Yeah, I haven't got any information on that at this
Do
point.
you know how much aid Turkey gave Christchurch in 2011 at the time of the earthquakes?
No, sorry, I haven't had a chance to look at that yet. Yeah.
Hey,
All right, last one.
How do you feel about going into the Australian Parliament as Prime Minister before you go into the New Zealand Parliament probably as Prime Minister?
Hadn't actually even thought of that until right about now. So I guess that's an interesting development. Look, it's my first visit here to Canberra, so my first visit to the Australian Parliament. They do things a little bit differently here. It's always interesting to see how other parliaments do things, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Is Canberra better than Wellington?
They each have their strengths and weaknesses.
What did you have for lunch?
What was that?
How good's the plane?
How good's the plane? All right, see you everybody.
Sausage
Cheers.
rolls, good beer.